What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of The Way.
Today we're going to be talking to you a little bit about a couple of things that you should consider before making that transition to living in an RV full-time.
That's right. We're going to be telling you our top 5 things that you should ask yourself or consider before deciding to make the transition into a full-time traveling lifestyle. All right, so our first question that we think you should consider before going full-time is pretty straightforward, and it is, are you willing to get your hands dirty?
You know, this could be literally or metaphorically. God knows we've done both.
Yeah.
But, you know, the amount of money that it takes to make simple repairs on your RV is astonishing. So if you're not willing to get your hands dirty and learn to do things that you've never done before, then this lifestyle's probably not for you.
Yeah, and on a more basic level, I think what we're getting at here is that the full-time lifestyle can be physically demanding at times. You know, there's a lot that has to do with tearing up, tearing down, moving locations, and like Adam mentioned, repair jobs. Things are gonna break. If you haven't been a homeowner before and you're not used to having to repair things yourself, that's gonna come up probably a lot more than it even does in a residential house. So you just need to be ready and willing to take on those tasks.
If you aren't physically fit and you aren't willing to do those sorts of things, then you might not be up to the task. Or maybe consider how much money that each of those tasks will cost when you're paying somebody else to do them.
Even if you have money to pay people to, you know, do any sort of repair, that's fine and dandy, but you might be in a location or in an area where it's hard to find somebody or find somebody that's willing to do the job that you need done in a timely manner. So those, you know, just because you have a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean that you can just count on finding somebody else to take care of it whenever you need.
Sooner or later, you're going to have to enlist the help of somebody somewhere along the way. And the community aspect of it is so important. We've had everybody's pitched in at some point or another, all of our families and friends, and everybody's been down here, especially when we were renovating the RV. And, you know, it is really helpful if you have somebody in your family who's maybe a little more handy than the average person. We've got Krista's dad and brother that are just incredible when it comes to any sort of advice, and I don't
hopping on a quick phone call. Hey, we don't know what we're doing. Have you ever seen anything like this? Can't tell you how many times they bailed us out.
That sort of resource is invaluable when it's 9 o'clock at night, everywhere's closed, and you don't know which way is up or down.
And, you know, YouTube's a great resource as well. You know, you don't necessarily need to have somebody in your back pocket if you don't already have somebody. And I can't tell you how many videos we've found for some really obscure issues that were like, there's no way there's a video about this, and there's a video about it. So, you know, just be willing to learn and be open to the experience.
Yeah, we've learned so much along the way, and, you know, maybe it'll be a benefit to you to be able to pick up the skill of learning new skills. And, you know,
the skill of learning new skills, that is a skill. It is
a skill and a desire and something that we've gotten really good at when we have a problem. The next thing that you should consider is, what exactly is your ideal RV or setup when it comes to a trailer?
This might seem like something that you're like, oh, I've already made that decision. I completely know what I want. But I can't tell you how many people buy a rig and then realize it wasn't the one for them necessarily.
Get out and go see some rigs, because you're not going to know what you want until you're in them.
Yeah, and as I was saying, you know, we're really happy with our rig, but if we had to do it all over again, we'd probably go with a fifth wheel, and we have our own reasons for that. And the main one being, you know, it really comes down to cost and repair. We went the route of a Class A RV, and there's a lot of benefits to that, and we really love it. But, you know, having the 2 engines has put us in some pickles every once in a while, you know, and having to find a mechanic that works on an RV engine is a lot more of a challenge than finding a mechanic that can work on a truck engine. So that's a huge consideration when deciding, you know, other than just size, you got to think about the practical things that, you know, maybe they don't necessarily affect your day-to-day lifestyle, but they could affect you in other ways down the road that you might not even be considering yet.
One thing you should really focus on is not just picking something for the aesthetic appeal of it. vans and schoolie conversions are very popular right now, but you're pretty limited in the amount of parks that you can stay in with a schoolie conversion. Most places won't even let you enter through the gate. Really think about the practicality of bringing your home around and parking at places, because I promise you it will be complicated and you will have to do work to get it done.
Yeah, and the other consideration too is, a lot of people think like, oh, I'll just buy a cheap van or a cheap schoolie. You don't always realize how much a renovation can actually cost. When we renovated the RV, we did not estimate correctly how much the cost of materials was going to be, and that's especially true right now. So, take those things into consideration when you are planning something out. Even if you're up to the task of doing a build, you really have to budget out and see if you're really going to be actually practically saving money in doing that, because it's not always the case.
One thing when you're thinking about what kind of rig you want is, do you need a car? Not everybody takes a car with them when they're traveling, so that's going to really kind of dictate what sort of setup that you need. We flat tow our Jeep behind our Class A, but maybe you have a diesel truck pulling your fifth wheel or an SUV pulling a travel trailer. It's a different combination for everybody, and really taking that into account for the whole picture is going to be important to your final decision.
I think what we're overall getting at here is that the rig that you pick is going to affect a lot more of your day-to-day and your week-to-week and your month-to-month and your year-to-year than you might be initially considering. So really, buckle down, do the research, and get into that nitty-gritty detail before you make a purchase. It's really important.
Our third consideration is, what is your pet situation? Do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Here are some things you should probably consider if you do. If you're getting a fifth wheel, you can't just throw them in the back while you're driving down the road. They're coming in the car with you. So if you have big dogs or a family, that adds up quick. And, everybody's all trendy about their boondocking experience, but you're not running your AC out in the middle of Utah. I'm sorry, I don't care how good your battery bank is, you're still not doing it. And you're not just leaving the dogs unattended or whatever animals that you might have without some air conditioning, because in the heat of summer, it can get hot fast.
Yeah, and you need to take into account that pretty much any type of rig doesn't have the insulation that a house does. So you're not going to be leaving your pets unattended the same way you would in a house. We have a camera set up and a temperature monitoring system so that we can always check on them and make sure it is not getting too hot or too cold in the rig if we do have to leave them in the rig and go somewhere. We do take them a lot more places with us now as well. That's something to consider if you have pets, that they're going to become a more intricate aspect of your lifestyle if you decide to start full-time traveling like this. So is your dog physically fit? Is your cat physically fit and capable and, emotionally able to, accommodate this lifestyle?
Yeah, every time you're taking them outside, it's probably going to be on a leash. Most people do not have yards, especially if you have a bigger dog. Some people set up some of those fences around their rig, but for our two dogs, they would jump right over that.
Yeah, and a lot of RV parks don't even allow that. So, you are going to be foregoing a yard. And, if you're a really outdoorsy person like us, we definitely go on a lot of hikes. We take our dogs to do a lot of things so they get their exercise in other ways. And we're always willing to give them walks and stuff like that. But, if that's not really something that you want to do and you have a dog that requires that kind of exercise, you might want to consider that before switching over to this lifestyle. What is their quality of life really going to look like in this situation?
And even if you are willing to accommodate your pet in this lifestyle, not everybody else is. RV parks are notorious for breed restrictions, weight restrictions. There are a number of restrictions that will limit what kind of pets you can bring.
Even amount of pets. Some people have 3 dogs, and there's a lot of parks that limit you to 2. Some parks just don't allow any pets whatsoever. That's a pretty common thing that you run into as well. Once again, it's not gonna, obviously we have 2 large dogs and we know other people that travel with more dogs than that. Obviously it's still possible to plan things out and figure it out, but it's gonna take more planning and time on your part in order to make things work. It's not gonna be as easy as just calling a place and making sure they're willing to accommodate you.
We don't have cats, but outdoor cats really don't gel with this lifestyle. They get lost really easily. It's not really it's not really proper etiquette to let your cat wander around an RV park. So, unless your cat's an indoor cat or leash trained, there's going to be some challenges presented that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, and once again, it's not like it can't work, but make sure, just like with a dog that needs a backyard, if you're not willing to walk it around, have that same consideration for your outdoor cat. I mean, they might not transition into this lifestyle as easily as you'd think. And yeah, as Adam mentioned, I think the biggest concern with that is they can get lost really easily because you're in new areas that they're unfamiliar with. And, some areas aren't very safe for outdoor cats, depending on where you're staying, if you're closer to other predators and stuff like that.
So make sure that when moving into this lifestyle that you really account for your furry friends.
So our number 4 consideration is a little bit more personal, but it's just as important as the other considerations. And it is important to stop and think and ask yourself, how does this fit into my long-term goals?
Will this put a fork in your career? Do you have kids? You have to consider homeschooling, working remotely. There's a whole slew of issues that come from being on 4 wheels on the road.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you don't have kids, that's, something that you might want down the road. How is this going to affect basically your career progress and your family goals progress? And, you might be saying, oh, not worried about any of that. But it is important when making any major life shift, whether it be traveling related or not, how it's actually going to fit in where you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. You really have to think about that.
You need to ask yourself those important questions like, I don't know, how long are you planning on traveling for? What will I do if after I get the rig, potentially renovate it, buy a new car maybe even? What if you don't like it? What if it's not
quit your job?
Yeah. These are all important things to consider. We're in a lot of Facebook groups on RVing, and a week in, 6 months in, people are like, I'm out. I don't like it. It's not for me.
That happens very commonly. And there's even been times that have tested us and made us question what the heck we're doing. It's definitely just like any other major life shift. You might get there, get neck deep, and then realize, oh, this really isn't for me. And that's fine. You don't have to stick with it, but make sure you're not putting yourself in a position where you're completely stuck if that's the case.
Your life, your ambitions, your friends, they don't stop when you hit the road. And you just really need to be able to determine, was it worth it?
I think at a base level, what we're getting at here is this is a really personal question you need to ask yourself. And it's really, what are you leaving behind when you go? And, if you go and you figure out that it wasn't for you, what are you coming back to when you're done? It's going to be a different answer for everyone, but it's definitely something that's important to consider before you just jump in.
And our last consideration of the day is the thing that makes it all go round is money.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get it?
How are you going to work remotely?
It's a constant struggle. You can be a work camper, you can have a remote job, you can do a whole number of different things, but what are you qualified to do?
Working remotely versus traveling and working remotely are really 2 different things. And finding a company that's willing to, be open to your lifestyle is a challenge in and of itself.
If you aren't in a career that translates to working from a computer or working remotely, then maybe you need to consider, are you willing to change your career to make this lifestyle happen?
And you don't necessarily need to work on a computer. There are definitely travel style jobs that move around, but you might not necessarily be in charge of where you want to go if that's the case. So then you need to ask yourself, are you willing to make those sacrifices in order to make it work? Really, at the end of the day, there's way more we could talk about with working remotely as a consideration. But just because you want this lifestyle, you still have to consider how you're going to pay the bills and keep food on the table.
I gotta say, for parking on dirt in somebody's lot, it ain't cheap.
Yeah, that is kind of one of the common misconceptions about full-time travel, is that it's more affordable. It's not necessarily true. It can be more affordable in certain locations and certain situations, but it's not always the case. You know, you're still gonna have health insurance considerations. You're still gonna need to eat. We went into this thinking it was gonna be a lot more affordable than it was. I laugh at our early budget estimates compared to what they actually ended up being.
And depending on how fast you're moving, gas is most definitely the biggest hit to your bank account.
I think you guys get the point. What we're saying is that working remotely is a big consideration. So, you know, are you willing to be flexible? Are you willing to switch careers? If you are willing to, are you actually, you know, what are you going to do? And is that actually feasible before you quit your current day job? You know, maybe try to see how feasible that is before you just jump in. And the other consideration too is, would you even enjoy working remotely?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain days where it's 2 p.m. or 5 p.m. and I haven't even gone outside yet. And, you know, you gotta really be intentional about getting up, moving around, because, you know, the saying is you're living out of your RV, not in it.
I know with traveling full time, it can be really hard to like get set up at a new location that you're really excited about, but it's Sunday night and you got to go to work the next day. I mean, it's not all rainbows and butterflies and vacation all the time like everyone makes it out to be.
We could go on and on about working remotely, but at the end of the day, it's just something you need to consider.
Yeah, and it's probably, out of everything we listed, unfortunately, the most important consideration you're going to have to ask yourself is, are you actually going to be able to make money in this lifestyle? Which is why next week we are actually going to be doing a video solely about the subject of working remotely.
In that video, we're going to be giving you some practical tips on how to actually make money in this lifestyle.
You're not going to want to miss it, because we're going to be talking about all the different options, things that you might not have even considered yet.
Well, that pretty much wraps it up for this week, guys. We really appreciate it if you've made it this far. And as always,
thanks for traveling with us. We'll see you next week. Bye.